Welcome to Finance Magnates Executive Interviews once more. I'm here with Andrew Pattison, Head of GRC Consultancy Europe. Thank you, Andrew, for sitting with me today, having a discussion about a very interesting topic. But tell me, how is FMLS going so far?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I flew in yesterday from Northern Ireland and I've been around the show, and this morning I was on a panel talking about artificial intelligence and fraud, which was quite interesting as well with the other panelists. So yeah, it's been good. If cold.
And cold. We have about 0 degrees, I think, today. Yesterday we had snow.
Yeah, not used to that.
Not used to that? You don't have snow in Northern Ireland?
Very rarely where I am.
Really?
Yeah, it's wet and windy, not necessarily cold.
Okay. Well, listen, I'm very excited about this interview because I'm very curious myself. We're going to talk about DORA.
Yep.
Now, what is DORA? I understand that you are the IT governance global head of the DORA.
Yep.
And you have written a very interesting guide called DORA, a guide to the EU Digital Operations Resilience Act. That's a mouthful.
Yes.
So tell us about it. What is DORA?
Right, well simply is, Digital Operations Resilience Act is actually a regulation. So it's a regulation which comes into full force on the 17th of January 2025, and it is aimed at regulated financial entities and their supply chain. So as the name suggests, it's about operational resilience. So it looks at all the requirements of what you would expect from a financial entity in how it's dealing with its operational resilience. And this is all leading on from the developments over the recent years about critical national infrastructure. And it's particularly relevant to financial services because the European Union and the financial services in the European Union are so interconnected that you need something which covers all of the regulatory areas, so everybody is working on the same page, has the same requirements. So you have a confidence in, if you're dealing with somebody in Portugal or Lithuania or in Germany, that everybody is doing the right sort of things they should be doing.
Okay, that clarifies a little bit, but what are the pillars of this regulation, and what are the areas of the regulation that impact the financial institutions?
Right. Now this is where it gets interesting. So we talk about the pillars based on the articles in the regulation. In a way, there's actually only really one pillar, but we'll then talk about the 5 pillars under that. And it's about risk. It's about management of risk and about how organisations deal with that. So the first pillar we talk about is risk. The second pillar would be incident management. The third pillar talks about testing your operational resilience. The fourth pillar, and this is a big one, is the management of your ICT supply chain in relation to risk. And the fifth pillar, which is the smaller one, is about information sharing between financial entities. But what DORA is where it really has its big impact is that it's not just the financial entities which are covered by it, but if you're an ICT supplier to a regulated financial entity and you are supporting something which is either classed as critical or important, as the ICT third-party supplier, you are covered by the requirements of DORA. And that, for some of those businesses, is going to be quite a bit of a change for them.
But how does it differ from the NIS directive or NIS2?
Right. Well, so yes. So there's lots of things out there. So you've got things like NIS and what we now have in the European Union, NIS2. Now, the biggest difference between them is that NIS2 is a directive, not a regulation. So NIS2 has to be enacted by national parliaments, across the EU. And they were meant to have done it by the 17th of October 2024. I may be wrong as today, but so far only one country has done that, and that's Belgium. And that again is aimed at critical national infrastructure, but DORA supersedes that for financial entities. But again, it's about risk, it's about governance. So the DNA of NIS2 and the DNA of DORA are very, very similar in what they're asking. But when you look at DORA, it is far more detailed. It's basically about incident management, business continuity and disaster recovery with the volume turned up. So
right.
It's quite detailed in what they're expected to do.
I mean, and obviously we're talking about an EU regulation.
Yep.
Which we're in London and it's FMLS, so a lot of these entities obviously operate within Europe or they're FCA regulated, so it affects them. But many of them and multiple of the attendees here, they're not necessarily incorporated or have operations within Europe. Does DORA affect entities outside of Europe?
Well, it's very interesting. First of all, there's a lot of financial entities in London who, if they've got a subsidiary or they're operating in Europe, they'll have a regulated entity in Europe, so they have to comply with it. But if you think about where we are, we're not that far from some areas like Shoreditch, where you've got an awful lot of the startups, a lot of the tech companies are based out of the UK. And if they are supporting or working with or servicing a financial entity which is regulated in the European Union, the fact that they're not in the European Union doesn't matter. They will still need to comply with DORA, because the financial entity needs to make sure that their supply chain is meeting the requirements of the regulation. And this is all about making sure that risk is understood and dealt with. And if you look at all of the big breaches of security, all the things which involve data protection, and when you go and look at all the big systems over the last, say, 10 years, most of them are about supply chain. Because organisations might have a very good idea about what the risk is with what they control, but when they go out into their supply chain, that becomes a slightly more unclear image. And this is about saying to those organisations, no, you've got to go and make sure that those people who are supporting you are meeting the requirements. And that's about governance, and that's about risk and all those sort of things. It's completely sensible what they're trying to do, because it's about making sure our financial services can deal with disruptions from cybersecurity events or anything like that, and still be able to deliver the services across the EU.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that this new regulation is going to come to force in January, correct?
Yeah.
How do you foresee the evolution and the application throughout 2025 for all of the financial institutions?
Yeah, it's interesting. So it's actually been around for 2 years, so it's enforceable from January. So there's a couple of things that financial entities will need to do in the first year. And again, a lot of this will be driven by what we call a competent authority. So that's the regulator in each of the countries which you're covered by. But what they will need to do is provide in a format and in a style and the information as defined by the regulation, their supply chain, who are their ICT suppliers supporting their critical and important functions. They also need to demonstrate a couple of things, that they've got an understood or an implemented risk management process, and that has been verified independently, and that can be internally within the organisation. As to actually how each competent authority is going to make sure that organisations are doing everything they need to do, will become clearer over the next year. But there will be more guidance on that from the relevant competent authority and the regulators which cover the European Union. But it is going to be, I imagine, something that will impact. The bigger financial entities are probably quite good at this, and actually a lot of the organisations I've been doing gap analysis and helping people remediate the issue, the things they haven't done, is that most of the big organisations, if people are asking me to help them or come in and do a gap analysis, they're dealing with DORA. It's the ones which don't realise that DORA relates to them, they're going to have the issues, and that's going to be a lot of the supply chain involved in it, because they don't realise that they are, even though they're not regulated directly by the entity, the regulator, they are affected by it at some point.
Very interesting. Thank you so much for clarifying DORA for me, Andrew. It has been very enlightening. I hope that everybody learned something. I definitely did. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Andrew.
Okay.